Welcome to this week's edition of Dugout Dish Podcast. I'm Andy Kirikides, joined with my wonderful co-host, Keith Glasser. Keith, how we doing?
Great. How are you?
I'm excited. We got another fellow Red Fox, the third Red Fox, to make an appearance on the podcast. I'm going to kick it over to you for the intro here, and then we're going to get rolling.
Sure. We're taking out all the heavy hitters with the former Red Foxes that are still in the coaching ranks. But today we're joined by the Hobart head baseball coach, Brad Cook, who graduated a little bit before you and I. We didn't have the pleasure of playing with him, but had a phenomenal career, won a bunch of championships like you and I were able to do. Brad's been coaching for a long time. We've hit almost every level, JUCO, Division 1, 2, and now 3. And I'll let him get into that here in a little bit, but the guy's got a wealth of knowledge and former Red Fox, and I'm super excited to have Brad on. Brad, thanks for joining us, man.
Pleasure, man. I've been watching. I've listened to some of the episodes, and so I'm pretty stoked about being here.
Yeah, we've been trying to get you, for the listeners, we've been trying to get him on for a while here, but hockey season runs quite a long time here in Western New York. So we finally freed up a night where we can get him on board, and we're going to be able to talk baseball for a while here.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, the boys. I mean, they're full grain into hockey. It's about every night. So yeah, I'm glad I can make it.
Love it.
Before we get going, give our listeners just a quick rundown of how you have become the head coach at Hobart.
All right. Well, I'm originally from Binghamton, went to Johnson City High School. From there, I was an undersized 5'8" pitcher who, 3-sport athlete. Back in the day, there wasn't all these, the PBRs and stuff. And so, I kind of slipped through the cracks and didn't exactly have the best grades, so I wasn't clearinghouse. So I knew junior college was my route. So from there, I went to Keystone Junior College down in Pennsylvania, which is now, Keystone College, which is, a Division III power. But at the time, it was not. It was a program that won 7 games. And, I'm pretty proud to kind of say that was one of the first classes that helped turn that program around. From there, worked pretty dang hard on my academics and my pitching, and got recruited by Marist by John Sheff, and was able to join into that winning program. I think it was the year before I got there, 2000. In 2000, they won their first MAC championship, and when I got there, we were able to do it again for a three-peat, 2001 and 2002. Sweeping 3 straight years without losing a conference game. Some of the best years of my life, some of the best baseball I was ever a part of. From there, I had played under pitching coach Jim Tyrell, and when I got done playing, I got the opportunity to play a very short career independent ball with the Elmira Pioneers, but I'll take it. I feel like I was pretty overachieved in that realm of things. But from there, he had said, "Hey, if you ever want to get into coaching, I would love to hire you." And it was let's fast forward about 3 years. I was back home in Johnson City coaching high school baseball, and he was named the head coach at Florida Southern College. And he called me and said, "Hey, I told you the next time I was a head coach, I'd give you a call." And here we are. So at that point, man, I packed up everything I knew and moved to Florida, and joined on his staff, a Division II national power, the most national championships in Division II baseball, Florida Southern. So I was there for 2 years, 2 great years. Both those years we were ranked number 1 in the country, got the regionals, but, wasn't able to quite get to the World Series. From there, I realized I kind of had to get out from underneath his umbrella a little bit, because he was a pitching guy. I was a pitching guy. And so from there, I had the opportunity to go move on to Polk State College, which is in Winter Haven, Florida. So it's Division I power. That's in a program that really hadn't won much. It only been to 1 World Series. And, I joined Al Corbeil's staff. From there, I was there for 8 years. We developed that. We turned that into a national power. It was year 2. We were able to win the state of Florida tournament and get to the College World Series in 2012. In those 8 years, we won 6 conference championships, which was great. It was a very blue collar program. We worked those guys, and just very fortunate to be able to coach with Al Corbeil and Colin Martin, and then have those players that's to sell out and work like they did for us. I was there for 8 years, so 10 years in the state of Florida. And at that point, I knew I was teaching, I was coaching, and I knew I needed something a little bit more. I wanted more. I wanted to get into full-time, coaching. And at that point, UMass Lowell gave me a shout. Ken Herring and Jared Edmondson. I'd known Jared for a very long time. He's from Johnson City, but head coach Ken Herring gave me that opportunity to join his staff up in Lowell. So we packed the family up, my 2 young boys and my wife. We packed up and moved to Massachusetts. So my first year there was 2019, was my first spring. So I was there for 3 years, and part of that with COVID kind of mixed in. From there, 3 great years. I'm pretty proud of kind of what we were starting to build there. But the opportunity to kind of head back west to upstate New York with Hobart College, I'd heard that they were going to be starting a program, and they were looking for a head coach. And from there, I kind of reached out to some of my contacts. I had some friends who played football here, had some pretty good contacts, and reached out and interviewed. And I guess you could say the rest is history. So
You probably don't know this, but the way you guys operated, so my recruiting process at Marist was a little bit funky. And I took my visit in February of my senior year. And I'll never forget this, but you guys were scrimmaging because you were a senior. It was that team that went like 41-11 or something, just totally ridiculous. I think you guys were in the Nebraska regional. Tim Allen hit a walk-off bolt against, I think they're Missouri State now, but I think it was like Southwestern Missouri at the time.
Yep, I gave him that opportunity because I blew the game in the ninth grade. So I gave Tim that opportunity to walk it off.
And I'm sure Tim relished every second of that opportunity, knowing Tim. But I was on campus doing the visit, and you guys were practicing, and you had the field flip-flopped.
Yeah, we did. Yeah.
So the home plate was in center field, and you guys were scrimmaging. I'm standing behind the cage with Shawnee Moran. Shout out Shawnee. Absolutely one of the favorite guys I ever played for.
Love Shawnee.
Working in the Cardinals organization now. And I just remember watching you guys do your thing. Yeah, Jimmy Willis is playing third base, and you got Sullivan playing short, and Botch and Homer and Bechtel and Traz, like all these really, really accomplished players walking around. And I just remember thinking, like, yeah, I want to be a part of that. And, sat in the office with Chef and was just like, so you want to do this? Because I definitely want to do this. And just I guess it's just kind of the culture that you guys had there. And I feel like I was lucky to get a little piece of that when I was at Marist. And it was something that was, it was the reason that I ended up going there and just taking essentially what was a walk-on opportunity, because I watched you guys do what you did. And I think it probably speaks to a lot of what drives you as a coach, is like the culture was so freaking strong. And like the way you guys went about your business, I was like, these guys are pros, basically. And
yeah, it's exactly what
part of it.
Yeah, it's exactly what it was. I know. Remember when I can remember taking my visit and sitting in the McCann Center and just talking with Chef and Tyrell, and Sully's the one who actually showed me around, and I can just remember just seeing campus and kind of walking around and seeing what they were doing. And I committed that next day. Like I knew as soon as I left, like I want to be a part of this. Like I want to win. This is where I'm going to go. And that culture that you speak of, it was hard. Like especially being a relief pitcher and kind of walking in. You got Uli, you got Traz, you got Bechtel. Those three dudes. Those are three pro arms right there. There's no crack on that rotation. It's like, all right, well, how can I bring something to the table? And going into my senior year, we brought in Chris Homer from Keystone, my roommate, kind of brought him in, added a few other pieces to it, and I'm telling you, I talk about this all the time. This is a pitch and stop that finished fourth in the country in ERA. And it was, you had to be locked in. Like you had to show up every day, locked in, ready to go, because I felt like, man, you might be like 7th on the depth chart. If you didn't throw well, like you quickly would be like 10th or 11th. And like, you might not see the mound for 2 weeks. And especially for me, someone who was always, underestimated, always feel like I had to prove myself and was still trying to find my way. Like that was pressure. That was self-inflicted pressure, but it was like, man, you need to be ready to go. Like there's no feeling out for a couple batters. Like you better come in the game ready to throw strikes, or like he's moving on to the next guy.
Yeah, that was a cool group. Homer, I'll always have a special place in my heart for that guy. I'm a freshman coming in, and he's arguably the best closer in the country going into his senior year. He obviously had some really good pro ball years, but that was the guy. It was like, all right, you give him the ball in the ninth, the game's over. And the appreciation I have for him and some of those older guys, Mike Sidoti, John McGordy, like these guys who had won a ton. And the only thing you had to do was show up and work your ass off. And that's all they wanted from you. And they'd hold you to a standard. And I learned how to operate as a player because of guys like that. And obviously you were a big part of building that culture. And, it shaped me as a coach, and it certainly shaped me as a player, that the one thing that has to show up every day is that you need to compete. And I don't think that's changed. And I think it's something that we try to stress a lot, is like, what you get in college baseball is what you earn. And I learned that early, that you earn everything you get, and what you get is what you earn. And those guys were a big part of it.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about how's it shaped me as a coach. I mean, I can tell you the back of our lift T-shirts this year said "Earn it." It was. I mean, it was our motto. It was exactly what I wanted. I wanted to create competition at every single position, so you could never get complacent. Like, you always knew there was someone on your heels, so you better be ready to go. And again, it's not results oriented, but it's like how you're going about your business, the process. Are you showing up? Are you going to work? Are you coachable? Are you doing all these things to make yourself a little bit better that day, right? It's either a plus or a minus. There's no in the middle. You either got better or you got worse. And that's always my goal as a coach, is to make sure we're always going plus, plus, plus. And how many days in a row can we stack those pluses together?
Get some. I
Get
remember
some, baby.
the get some t-shirts. Those are great. So,
Get some.
all right. So first question, how do you go about identifying players that are a fit for Hobart? And what does that look for you guys, like for you guys in the recruiting process?
Yeah, I mean, I think, we got the two different, you got position players, you got pitchers, but I think first and foremost, it's your connections, it's your network, right? It's guys like you guys, it's my connections from UMass Lowell, it's my connections in Florida, it's my connections in New York State. And, I'll never forget Jared Edmondson at UMass Lowell. Like, you might see a guy on social media, you might see him on Twitter, or you see certain things, or your kid might email you. But at the end of the day, it's almost like you're always going to get the guys that you're supposed to get. And ultimately, they usually come from your trusted sources. It's almost guaranteed of, like, that's where it's very seldom do you get a guy that's kind of a new connection, a new network. Obviously, those things have to happen. But, for us to identify, it's often, it's people calling us and saying, like, hey, I got a great fit. He's perfect for Hobart. He's perfect for you, especially, those people know how I am. They know how I coach. They know what we're looking for, so positionally, like, we're athletic. I want to run. We want to do certain things. We want to put pressure on defenses. We want to take care of the baseball and defensive side of things, and then on the mound, I want to throw strikes. I want guys to throw strikes. And I believe in myself, the development of guys, and I believe in Vin and Ols and Dan and their development of position players, so it doesn't have to be a guy who's clear cut, ready to go right from the get go, but it's something that we're looking like, hey, what could this kid be? Because that's we do. We love the coach. It's not, roll the baseballs out and here you go, let's go play. Like, no, it's very hands on, and we work hard with our guys.
Yeah, I think sometimes that gets lost in the shuffle in the recruiting process, and I think it can get overlooked at times. And is the development piece, and not all coaches have that stance. A lot of coaches, I shouldn't say a lot, but there's a good portion of coaches that are more focused on having a guy who's ready for them day one, which obviously has its benefits. But I think that programs, especially, and we'll get into this in a few, you starting up the program at Hobart, that development piece has got to be a foundational element for you guys, and being able to bring players through your system, being able to identify traits that you value, that you can cultivate when they get there. And, it's not everybody has that answer about the development piece. And I think it's cool to hear you say that, because, it's not something that's often talked about too much. It's all about the evaluation process and less about what are you going to do with a kid when he gets there.
Yeah, I mean, and that goes back to my JUCO routes. That's the way we were at Polk, especially early on. We were going against Chipolas of the world, right, and the Santa Fe's, and we weren't getting the LSU transfer, the UF transfer, the Florida State transfer. Like, we weren't getting those kickbacks, and so it was very much like we had to go find the diamond in the roughs. Like, we had to go digging. So that's part of why we dipped into Canada. That's why we dipped in the upstate and the northern states. And that was our big thing. It was like, we're going to bring him in, we're going to coach him, we're going to work him hard, and we develop guys. And it's funny because I don't know how many times, like, man, who is this kid? What high school did he go to? A lot of times, like, man, I hadn't even heard of this kid. I was like, yeah, because he was 85, 86, or he was the number 5 kid on his high school team, in Florida, and we worked hard, and that was our thing. And so it's kind of the stance we've taken. It was kind of what I brought to UMass Lowell, and it's definitely what we're doing here at Hobart. So, I mean, I love the coach, so that's way to go about it.
Tag Montague told me one time, sometimes you got to do some of that coaching shit. And it was some of the best. It was some of the best advice I'd ever gotten as a player, and that was my first year coaching. Is that sometimes you just got to roll up the sleeves and go get after it with your guys.
No question.
So, what you talked about leveraging your network, and obviously that's a big piece of the puzzle, and it's something that seems to be a common thread for guys that we've had on here is those trusted sources. How much are you using different platforms like Perfect Game and PBR? Like, how does that factor into identification or any evaluations that you do? Good, bad, or ugly. Like, how are you guys leveraging those platforms?
Yeah, man, PBR is a pretty big one for us, especially up here. We go to New York State games, but just their profile pages are big, right? You can see video, you can get some of their metrics, right? Obviously, those things aren't the be all end all, but let's just say a coach gives his kid, or even a kid emails us, and you're like, okay, well, let me check him out, and he includes his profile. It's just a quick snippet of what the kid, what he can do, so it gives you an idea of like, yeah, like I like that, or like like, I don't know, I don't really love that, but it's not a yes or a no, but it kind of gives you just a little bit of an eye, just a little snapshot of what we think what that kid could possibly do. So we use them all the time.
That's good to know. I mean, I think there's a little bit of a false perception around that stuff at times, that that's the only piece. And I think you hit on the important part, is that it's a piece of the evaluation, and it gives you something to jump off that, if you see a kid ran a certain time at a PBR, then that's a real time. And I know the network up there from the PBR guys is pretty deep, and it's a lot of, I don't want to call it grassroots, but there's trusted folks on the ground in some of those states. I know specifically New England and New York, those guys really get after it in terms of knowing those guys. And I'm sure they're probably a pretty good resource for you, right?
Oh yeah, they definitely are. Jared, I mean, and Haley, yeah, I mean, those are great. We can easily reach out to them anytime. When it's up Dan Savit too, I mean, all that stuff. Yeah, they're great. I mean, they know kids. They put on, especially in New York. I mean, New York, PA. I mean, New England, just in general. I mean, that's a lot of area to cover, and they hold a lot of events. And I mean, they do a really good job of identifying kids and getting them in front of coaches.
Obviously, the talent piece is a box that's got to get checked. But we talked about it at the beginning with the culture stuff from Marist. What are a couple of the things that you value during the evaluation process from a character perspective? And then how do you actually evaluate some of that through the process with a kid, whether it's via a visit or you watching them play a game? Like, just take a couple minutes to kind of talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm big on the way they play. I love like I said, we love our athletes. So I love kids who play multiple sports. I mean, that was me. I was the 3-sport football, hockey, baseball guy. And if I would tell you, I mean, I played baseball like a football, hockey guy. I mean, it was Lenny Dykstra. It was balls to the wall. It was the eye black covered in dirt and laying out for balls, diving head first. Like, that's me. And I love to play the game that way. And so I love to see kids who play the game that way. Especially now, I think we know that the game it's gotten a lot of the antics, a lot of the elbow guard, a lot of things that are coming along with it. Doesn't mean you're not playing hard, but I think a lot of it's become a lot more look at me, where I always like the guy was like, hey, look at me, because look how I play, look how hard I go, on balls to the wall. I'm fearless. It's the hard 90. It's the routine ground ball that's short, but it's still a hard 90. Like, those are the guys that I truly love, and I think with the athlete part of it too, I mean, those guys are, they didn't spend all winter hitting, or they don't spend all summer doing things, because they are in the weight room, they're doing other things. And so again, you talk about the unpolished diamond, like, well, shoot, this kid's never really focused on baseball. Like, where's he going to go? And so that's a very simple thing for me to see. But after that, it's, you meet with them on their visits, you ask the questions to them, and you just kind of go with your gut. I've been doing this for, I don't even know now, 16 years, I guess it is. I don't even know what it is. And, sometimes you miss, sometimes you're right. Sometimes you go, man, I got a feeling. And I always go back to Ken Herring. He talks about, like, he's got the face, and I think there's a certain face that baseball players have, and you just know it. It's tough to describe, and you look at him like, man, he's just got that face. Like, he just looks like he's a dude, like he's a stud. And, and so you try to gauge it on those visits, talking to him. You kind of see how they talk with their parents and how they handle things. And you kind of get a gauge on their parents too, or, who's dominating the conversation, who's dominating the visit. Is it the kid asking the questions or is the parent asking the questions? So you kind of gauge on it a little bit that way. I mean, it's not always a tall tale. Like I can go back to, some of our best guys here in Hobart. Their parents dominated the visit and they're great kids and they work hard and they do all these things, but they're very quiet. They're very, they're reserved kids. So you're not necessarily going to rely on that kid to be the vocal leader, and maybe you don't need him to be, but, so you take pieces of that and you just use your past history and your past references of like, hey man, this is like, it's a red flag or it's not, or the green means go. Like, yeah, let's take a chance on this kid. Or like, I absolutely love this kid. Like, let's do it.
Yeah, I think the multiple sport athlete one is something that I always loved. And probably, I mean, I was a 3-sport athlete. I know Andy played multiple sports too, but like this as well as I do. Like, you don't see it anymore, unfortunately. Like, there becomes this specialization at such a young age where it's like, this game to me is, and this, like, this game's far too hard to just do this 24/7, 365. Like, it's just, in my personal opinion, like, you're going to burn out. Like, there comes a point in time, like, even the pros step away for a little bit of time to get themselves right. And I think to ask super young kids to do it, like, you can still go compete in other sports. And, likely, unless you're going to a super small school, like, likely you're not the dude on the football team. Like, you're probably one of the better players, but you're not like the star quarterback or running back. And maybe you are, I don't know. Or maybe you're not the point guard, or you know what I mean? Like, you have to find different ways to contribute to teams when you're not the guy. Like, you might be the guy in baseball, but not the guy in other sports. And I think that that's just as valuable for young kids' development to figure out like how to be a part of a team and how to carve out a role, because you're going to face adversity. Like, when you get to college and you go play for you, or when guys played for me or Andy, like, I don't care who you are, at some point in time during your college career, there's going to come some adversity and you're going to have to stare it down and face it, or tuck tail and run. And when you tuck tail and run, it's not going to end well for you. And, I think when you can kind of foster those types of things and be able to do those at a younger age, maybe in different sports, like, you learn those skills that then become valuable when you do get to college and you start playing college baseball and stuff. Because it's, we've talked about this before, you and I, like, you're never going to go through a season of baseball. I don't care how specialized you are. Like, you're never going to go through a year of college baseball like you will your freshman year, where all of a sudden you're traveling a ton, you're living out of a bag, especially if you're playing in the Northeast, Mid-Atlantic, New England area. Like, you're living out of a bag for the first 5 or 6 weeks. And then you still got to go to class, you got to go to practice, you got to lift, you got to eat, you got to do laundry. Like, all of a sudden it's like, yo, what is going on right now? And if you can't handle that because all you've ever done is just hit in a cage and take some ground balls and stuff, like, it's probably going to get a little tough. And, then the question becomes like, what are you going to do about it? I think that, like, in my experience, I always felt that kids, and I'm not saying everyone has to be a multiple dual sport athlete or tri-sport, like, but in my experience, the kids who had played multiple sports for a long time, and even 3 sports, like, they were better equipped to handle some of those adversities earlier on in their careers than some of the other guys. And maybe it's anecdotally, I don't know, but my experience in the 16 years I coached college baseball, like, those guys always seemed as though they were better equipped early on to kind of handle those things. But I think, like, and to your point, like, you get that guy that, like, oh, they played football and they wrestled. Like, they didn't do a lot of baseball in the Northeast in the fall and in the winter. Like, this kid, if we can really get him to develop, like, this kid's going to make huge jumps when he gets to campus. And I think that those are things that, when you do this long enough and you like, when you look to develop guys, like, those guys, all of a sudden, like, you look up and they're sophomores and you're like, yo, how'd you get this kid? Like, well, he was under recruited. Nobody wanted him because he didn't really play a lot of baseball and he was a little unpolished, but kid's uber athletic, played cornerback and wrestled. Like, I don't know, kid's pretty athletic. So we took a chance and you can develop him. And I think, I've said this before, and I'll probably die on this hill eventually as I get older. But, like, I do think that a lot of Division III coaches, in my personal opinion, are some of the best developers of talent in college baseball, because you have to be if you want to win. And I'm not saying this because you're on our podcast and you're our friend, but, like, what you did in 2 years is incredible. Like to start to take over a program and then legitimate, like, have a chance to get into the conference tournament, a crossover series, like that's super impressive. Like it's awesome. I want to swear, but I'm not going to. It's awesome. Like, but I think those types of things need to be celebrated and thought about in this game of like, these dudes are really good at what they do. Like you can't it takes a lot of people taking over a program a long time to do this. And if you can do it in a time that is that condensed, hats off to you, man. Like you've done a great job. Like I'm super happy and I'm proud of you. And like, it's awesome to be a friend of yours and a fan from afar, but like, I'll die on this hill. I think some of the best guys at developing are at the Division III level.
Oh, I mean, should do. I appreciate that. I think, I guess one of my attributes is I'm very impatient, so I can't wait around to win. So like, we got to go after it now. And, but I think, and just going back to, to the athletes, playing the football, the wrestler, right? I mean, maybe their baseball team's not very good, but their football team was very good. So the kid knows how to win, but if you only pay attention to the baseball side of it, right? Or kid is a football player. Well, that means he knows what it means to have an assignment to do your job. If you don't do your job, right, everything falls apart. Right. If the kid's a wrestler, right, he knows what it means to only look the man in the mirror. Well, you can't look at anyone else. If you don't win, like you're out there alone, right? You're out there in the circle, no different than when you're in the box, you're on the mound, like there's nowhere to hide, right? You're there. And so that kid knows what it means to win or lose. Like I look in the mirror, like you either do it or you don't, and it goes with all the other sports, like all those things, all the different athletic things that go along with it, but also too, how you get coached, right? How you get coached in football is probably not how your baseball coach coached you. I mean, again, I was a hockey kid and I mean, I got coached hard. I played for some crazy ass people, and it's as simple as that. So it was easy for me to go play for John Chef, and so when we're not playing very well and he's cursing at you under his breath and everything else, or like Jim Tyrell and he's on you and wearing you out about stuff, like it's all right, man. I've been worn out play times, when I've blown a coverage as a defensive back, or, I turn the wrong way as a quarterback and I blow the play up. Like, yeah, everyone in the whole damn stadium know I just went the wrong way. And, it's kind of the way it was. And I think that's part of it. And I laugh because I know one of my pitchers, one of our players he had said to his dad, who was a professional hockey player for 13 years, he was like, Dad, I think coach is like a little more of a hockey guy than he is a baseball guy. And I said, yeah, that's a fact, and I tell people that I tell them that right from the get-go is like, I coach hard. Like I'm going to be on you, man. Like I'm not going to let you get complacent. I'm going to continue to challenge you. I'm always going to push your buttons. Like I'm going to find what it is that makes you go, and I'm going to keep going on it. I'm not going to let you get comfortable. Like that complacency is a killer. Never going to let that happen, and it's part of why we've been able to make those strides, because our guys know that and they love it. And when they said yes to come in here, they knew exactly what we were getting into and what we were trying to build. And, hats off to the players. Like, to be honest, my coaching staff, my players, it's a full community. They're great, man. They work, they get after it.
No, they do. And I think it's interesting, like when because we've never really kind of dived into this before, and it's probably something Andy and I should do, but like the ability to be coached and be coached, like, because there's so many different styles of coaching out there. And we all came up, we're not old for everybody who listens to this. I've said this 1,000 times, but like we came up in an era where like, you got worn out. It just didn't matter. And I mean, I know the guys you played for. I mean, the guys we played for were, no different really. But like it was, to your point, like when you play multiple sports and like, I wrestled, and like there's nothing that you could say to me really that like I haven't said anything worse to myself after a loss. So like I was in I played for George Rogers, who I've told this story before. He told me he dropped me in the 8-hole because that's where bad hitters hit. He used other words. Like there's not really much that, it's not going to shake me up when I have to get worn out. And I think that sometimes, especially now, like there's not, I remember the last couple of years, like I had to tell my freshmen when they came in, like everyone knew by the time they, when you come in, I tell you. So, the juniors and seniors, they're whatever with it. And like, if I yell at you, and I didn't really do a lot of yelling as I got older, but like, if I yell at you, like I don't go home and lose sleep over like, and not like you. Like I'm yelling at you because I'm trying to get more out of you, or like, it's something that we've talked about 9 billion times that you keep screwing up. Like, I'm going to get into you because I'm going to coach you that way. And like, I felt like guys were like, I think come in the dugout the next day and be like, hey, what's going on? They're like, whew. I'm like, yo, I'm not mad at you. Like, I didn't go home last night and tell my wife, like, Brianna, let me tell you about this kid. Like, I literally was past it. The second it, like, about 20 seconds later, I'm over it and on to the next thing. Like, whatever. But like, they hang on to it and it's like, man, like, it's okay. Like, we're out here, we're competing, we're trying to win, we're trying to do a lot of things. Like, it's, it's like what's a dodgeball? We're sweating like grease monkeys out here, when he slips and throws the ball. Like, say we're competing out here. It can go sideways a little bit, and I think that there is a difference in, I think, the way that you have to coach kids nowadays. I don't think it's negative, but I do think that it's a little bit different than what we went through and what we kind of had, the way we were coached. But I think that, like, you can pull the positives out of that and not necessarily be like that, dictator, whatever. And I do think that part of it now is your kids, I'm going off on a tangent, I'm sorry, but like, your kids want to see that you're actually like a human being aside from just being a coach. Whereas like when we grew up, like, I didn't know anything about our head coaches' personal lives. Like, by the time I left RPI, like, they knew my wife, they knew my son, they knew our dog, like, but like, you got more out because, like, all right, like, he's not just a robot who only cares about baseball. Like, there's other stuff going on. Like, and I feel like you could get more out of guys when they know that about you and what's going on. Like, and you can still coach them hard because they know, like, hey, it's coming from a really good place where he cares about me and wants me to get better. It's not coming from he's trying to, he doesn't like me and just, he's going to yell at me. Like, that's two distinctly different things, in my opinion.
Yeah, there's no question. I think, one of the things we started this year was we started doing weekly meetings. We started doing journals, and one of the things that we did an I am from poems, and every guy had to write one. Everybody shared it, and I started with mine, and I just gave them just my upbringing and my background of, like, I'm the son of a truck driver, and my mother was a janitor, and we had holes in the floors of our cars and a lot of other things, and had a paper route that I had to deliver at 4 a.m. because I had to do it early because I was lifting at 6 a.m. before school because I had hockey or I had football or whatever it may have been. And I just humanized myself, and I think so that was always big. And I know, like, the players always appreciate that stuff, or, anytime I talk about my family, I always get emotional, anything like that. And so, yeah, I think the players know if you care. And, and I remember hearing and saying, like, don't listen to my tone, listen to my message. And oftentimes we know that, like, you're getting your ass chewed and stuff like that. It's always tough, and I guess the best thing I always say is, like, listen, be more concerned when I'm not talking to you. That should be more concerning than if I'm yelling at you or if I'm getting on you, because I know it's coming from a good place, like you said, and,
right. I'll never forget. We'll move on from this, but I'll never forget. Like, I got into my guys one year about, like, we were hitting a little bit of a skid, and I was like, no one does anything extra. Like, no one's out here early. No one stays late. What are we doing? And of course, everyone decides to stay late that day. So, like, fast forward a year, and we had a catcher who's playing pro ball right now, and he's from a baseball family. They're great. And I got into him again about it, and I was like, today's not the day. I look, and he's like, yeah, today's not the day to stay after.
Oh, that's so funny. And I laugh because I think about this year, I've never had to be more positive, like, after games, like, win or lose. And you think about it, you don't play well, right? Your team doesn't play well, and you just want to wear them out, right? You just want to vent. And I'll give myself credit because I felt like I really did a good job this year of controlling myself, because I don't know how many times I was just like, oh my God, like, I'm ready to lose it. Like, they need an awakening. And those are the things that's what keeps me awake. It's not that I yelled at you. It's like, man, how do I get them to do the things that we need them to do? How I get that message to them. And I can remember we went on an 8-game winning streak after this. We sat in our field house and I talked to them, and I can remember just grinding over it all night long. Like, how do I go about this? Do I wear them out? Like, what do I do? And I just flipped it and I just said, like, hey, we're all in this together. Like, this is a family, and, win or lose, like, we're all chipping in on this, whether we're playing bad or we're not playing bad. Like, this is a group effort we're doing right now. And it started when I told them we're the most contagious team I've ever seen. And it really was. And it stuck true. We were doing positive things. Like, next thing you know, we're all rolling. Like, now we're hitting, now we're pitching, we're playing defense. Or, man, if one thing went wrong, I can guarantee you that about 3 pitches later, it's going to be a wild pitch or something's going to happen. And you could just see it snowball the other way. So good, bad, and indifferent. I said, hey, we're in this together. So like, let's just stick together and let's keep battling, and so, yeah, you can't, you can kind of somewhat coach the kids the same way, but it's not to the extent that we used to get.
No.
I think the big thing, if I was going to give a piece of advice to kids who get to the college level, because there's no denying it, like you're going to get yelled at, like you're going to get held to a high standard if you want to play a college sport. Like it's the filter, right? Guys who coach in college, if you're not playing for a coach who's super competitive and is really driven by trying to get the most out of that team, what are you doing it for? Right. But the best piece of advice I would give to kids is don't take it personal. And if you're getting the other side of the correction, there's probably a reason that that's happening. And if you can separate yourself, kind of what you said, from the tone, from the message, you can take coaching no matter how it comes to you. Because to your point, you can coach guys in different situations in different ways. You probably coach different players different ways. As you get to know them, there's some guys that you can probably jump their ass and you're going to get a really good response out of them. Other guys might have to be a more personal touch to it. But for anybody who's listening to this who plans on playing in college, or if you're playing in college right now, like, don't take it personal, because if you're in a program where your coach really cares, the only reason he's giving you a correction, or he's telling you did something wrong, or trying to get you to do something different, maybe not even something wrong, just trying to get you to do something different. He's doing it because he's trying to get you better. He's trying to get you to elevate your game. And I think that's probably one of the best traits you can have as a player is don't take stuff personal. And if you can master that, taking coaching and rolling with the inevitable ups and downs of a baseball season becomes a lot easier, because you understand that, as a coach, we're trying to find a way to get you to play at the absolute top of your game as many days as we can possibly do it.
Yeah, no question. I mean, it's trusting the process. And part of that process is you're going to get coached hard. You're going to get corrected. You're going to be criticized. And, whether it's constructive or they just get on you and they wear you out, either way, they're doing it for a reason. And it's part of it. It's part of the process and part of the thickening of your skin, because listen, if college baseball, what comes with it, the other team chirping, the other team wearing you out. And so, like, listen, if you can get used to getting worn out, then you don't even hear those voices in the other dugout. Like they become unfazed. But man, if you got rabbit ears and you can't tuck those things in, and you hear all the noise all the time, whether it's a teammate, it's a coach, it's the other team, like it's your own inner self, you're going to be in a world of trouble.
And I think like your teammates are going to probably be on you too. Like if you have a good culture, your teammates are going to be on you about what you're doing too. And if you can't handle that stuff either, it's going to be a little tough. Like I've said this on here before. Like I remember my freshman year, Andy screaming at me behind the plate, telling me to figure it out. And I was like, this is week 1 of the fall. Like, I don't even know what am I figuring out, bro? Like, what is this? And it was like, I mean, I figured it out eventually, like whatever it was. But like and then you, like, as you get older and like you start doing, I ended up being a captain. Like you end up trying to do, like you're doing that with younger kids, and it's not necessarily, to be a negative. It's like, hey, this is how we do things here. This is how we've, built a championship culture. These are the things that we got to do in order to do this type of stuff. And, if you can't take that kind of criticism, I don't want to say criticism, constructive criticism from your teammates, like it's kind of the same thing. And I do think like in good programs, like it means so much more coming from your teammates than it will from any of the coaches or me, myself, Andy, you. Like we can talk to her blue in the face, but when all of a sudden your teammate holds you accountable, your peer, it's like, whew, okay, like I should probably listen to what's going on here. And that's where, when you start having that stuff happen, it's like, all right, like we got something special cooking here.
That's a player-led team. I mean, that team's going to win. There's no doubt about it. It'll always go better from a teammate. There's no question. And honestly, if they don't handle it well from a teammate, then that's a different conversation. Like, do you want to be a part of this or don't you want to be a part of this? And right, that's a whole other different program. You can't handle it from a teammate. Then now that's a program conversation now.
Right. And I think it goes back to, like when you were talking about bringing families in on visits and talking to kids, and like, you can really like, when you're recruiting kids, like you're recruiting every aspect of that kid. Like you're recruiting the character, you're recruiting the athlete, you're recruiting the family. Like, and you can discern, you can start to pick out a lot of the things that might work, and how they interact with their siblings or their parents on the visit. Like that can tell you some clues of like, I don't know if this is going to work. If this is how he talks to mom and dad, what's he going to take from me? And if this is how he treats his brother or sister, like, is he going to interact well with the teammates? Like what, and you can kind of start to pick some of that stuff out. And I think it's important to know that. And everyone's on their best behavior in the recruiting process, but like you can start picking some of this stuff out and kind of figuring out like, hey, I don't know if this is going to fit in our culture, and Traz said this when he was on last year, and it was something that I started to realize towards the back half of my coaching. Like you start to figure out kids that might not fit with you personally, not necessarily that they're bad players or like they wouldn't necessarily like they might end up at another school in the league and beat you for 4 years. But it's like, I don't know if I would have got that out of that kid because he didn't seem like he was going to be able to, I was like you, like, I'm going to coach you hard. Like, I don't know if he can handle that. And sometimes you just got to go in a different direction of like, I don't know if this is going to jive well with me. And cause you spend so much time together, like, and if this isn't going to work, like I'd rather make the decision on the front end than trying to figure out, when all of a sudden that it hits the fan after, a couple months or a year.
Yeah. I mean, you're always going to get the kids you're meant to get. I mean, there's no question. And that's part of why, I'll have our guys go to lunch. I'll always have one of our leadership council guys go to lunch with a recruit, and, the kids will always relax a little bit around then. That's when they'll ask them the real questions. And, your players are your best recruiters. It's the same thing, right? I mean, we're all salesmen. We're all selling why you should come play for us, why you should come to Hobart and all that stuff. But the players aren't. The players will give you a good read. And that's why I love that part of it is like, hey, what do you think of this kid? How'd you feel? And they're honest. The players won't care. They'll be like, he was a little bit full of himself. Like, I don't know. Or like, man, he was awesome. He was great to talk to, like very down to earth or whatever it may be, and some of the best things we've done is definitely that.
I love that part of it. Like I would send him off with a player. One of our captains or older guys who've been around for a while. I'm like, hey, what do you think? And they're like, yeah, okay. I kind of thought the same thing. Or what'd you think? Like, that kid was nails. Like, unbelievable questions. Like, seems super good. Like, loves to get in the weight room and get after it. Like, I think he'd be great here. Okay. Awesome.
Yep. Love it.
Yeah, the digging on the character piece is something that took me a little bit of time to figure out as a young coach because I was so obsessed with trying to find kids who were good enough. But that really becomes a separator when you realize, to your point, that there's a ton of talented kids out there. And once you hone in on a kid who's talented enough, what are you doing to figure out if that kid's a right fit? And a good friend of ours kind of put it a way that I resonated with me was, you got to find out if you want to be around that kid for 4 years. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, we want to be able to show up and enjoy being around the kids that we coach just as much as we want them to enjoy showing up to the field. Like, there's nothing worse than showing up to a field as a coach and you don't feel good about the guys you're coaching. And I've had that early on in my coaching career when we weren't very good, that it's tough sometimes. But when you have a group of kids that you enjoy showing up because they're the right kind of kid, you can coach them, you can push them, you can live with the mistakes because they're in the right place from a character perspective. They're doing the right things in order to try to get better. And that the homework that you do, talking to high school coaches, talking to other sport coaches, if it's a football player, can you get the football coach on the horn? Do you have a player that's played with that kid in the past that can give you an honest read and really digging on the kid? Because I don't know, I always felt more comfortable. I'd rather miss on a kid because he wasn't good enough and not because he wasn't the right kind of kid.
I mean, that's some of the best advice you could probably give a young coach right now is absolutely that. I mean, I'd much rather lose with a team that I enjoy being around than win with a bunch of kids that I don't like being around. And it's not enjoyable. Win or lose, it's not enjoyable, and you said it perfectly. Like, you can handle it. You can handle a loss. You can handle a mistake if you enjoy being around the kid and their intentions are all in the right place and they're giving everything they can and they care. They care about you. You care about them, and it's just different. I've definitely been on some teams where it's not enjoyable to come to the ballpark, and it makes it tough. It makes it a really long season.
Not only that, but it also we've talked about this before, and I'd love to hear your thoughts too. Like when you're talking about like, hey, like what keeps you like, there's a lot that keeps coaches up at night. I like, admittedly, so I've lost a lot of sleep over this stuff. But I also think like, and this is something that I think is true. And someone said this to me, like, probably right when I became a head coach, like, their window to play college baseball is so small. Like now, if we have another pandemic, like you could play for 27 years, but generally speaking, like you have such a small finite window, like, when you're coaching, like you get to strap this on every year after year after year after year and go and compete and do all this stuff. Like they only get 4 years. Like, so to that point, like you want to make sure that you have really good kids around you for those 4 years because you want to be able to want to go to the field and you get to go do this stuff and have a lot of fun and coach these kids up and win a lot of games and compete versus like there's that drain of like, again with this. And like, because it wears on you and you try to bring as much as you can, but like it becomes a lot harder, I think sometimes when you miss on that character stuff. And look, like if you're nobody hits 100% on all of their recruits ever in the history of ever does that happen. But like, if you're going to miss on the talent side and have good kids around that are going to show up every day and work. Cause you like, how many times you've had conversations? Like if I had 9 of Jimmy Smith over here, we would be really good. Doesn't play a lot, but he shows up every day. He works hard in the weight room, talents. Like if we've all had that conversation. Like I would rather miss and have that than some talented kids that might win us some games, but it's just a drain to be around.
I mean, and not only those kids who play, but I mean, you're talking the 30, 31st, 32nd, 33rd, 34th, 40th guy on your roster, right? They might not be a kid. You're like, hey, they might get 20 career at bats or they might throw 5 innings or maybe they're your bullpen catcher. Like, I mean, those kids, yeah, you can't have them being a distraction and bring something else. Like you gotta love being around those kids because those are the kids who are gonna bring it. They're gonna bring the energy. They're the ones in the dugout. They're the ones who keep it going in the dugout. And those are really those are the life of your team and your culture. Because if you can get those guys going and you get those guys believing, then then you really get some stuff going. So yeah, 100%.
Yeah, those back end. It's interesting that the back end of the roster guys have such a huge impact on the day to day. They might not impact game day from a box score perspective, but having kids who show up and practice hard every day, like I don't think in the coaching world it's undervalued, but I think from the outside looking in, it's something that's hard to speak to people who haven't lived it, but how important it is to have a 6th outfielder who can practice really well, or having a 4th catcher who takes bullpen super serious, even though he knows that he's 3 injuries away from getting an at bat. Like if you have kids who show up just excited to be there every day because they know that they bring something valuable to the table, even if it doesn't show up in the box score, I think a lot of times that's what pushes a good team over the line to being an exceptional team. It's not necessarily the star power always, but it's the other dudes that are kind of the engine, right? You got the flashy stuff, your 3-hole guy, your 4-hole guy, the dude who throws nitro on the mound. But those back end guys, a lot of times they're really what's like the foundation of a really high quality program.
Yeah, I mean, those are your glue guys. I mean, that's what they are. They're the ones who bring everyone together. They're the energy, right? They're the energy. They're the best. I mean, you have to have them. And 100%, those are the guys talent is aside. It's like, hey, do they just love playing baseball? Do they just love the fact that they're getting this opportunity? And they're the best. like honestly, we have several of those guys that like, man, they might not contribute much on the field, but like, man, they bring so much to the table to the point where, I mean, one of these guys is going to be our captain for us next year. He's our number 3 catcher. He was a transfer and he's probably got about 3 career at bats and he's going to be one of our captains because he's the ultimate glue guy. And he's so respected and he really brings everyone together. He's kind of that mutual between, different cliques of the team. He's that guy who's kind of in the middle and he's the best glue guy and he's going to be one of our captains.
It always amazed me how guys who did that stuff selflessly, it always seems to work out well for them. They always seem to get an opportunity somehow, some way, and then they capitalize on it and they end up with a bigger role than as a coach you would have ever imagined. And it happened on every good team that I had a chance to coach, where you had the kid that you were trying to replace on the field every year. And then you look up and you're like, well, this kid started 160 games in his career because he just did all the stuff that you were supposed to do. He did it with a ton of energy and he showed up every day. It's amazing how it works out for guys like that.
Yeah, and those guys know they got a chip on their shoulder. They know that you're trying to over recruit them. They're aware that their job's not safe, and those are the workers, man. They know what it means to show up every day and earn it.
100%. I'd be remiss if I didn't ask this question, and I've been waffling with how to do this. I don't even know how to ask the question, but you are in such a unique position. And you're one of the few coaches probably in the whole country who has started a program. What was that like? Like, I mean, we were all fired up when you got the job, and I remember talking to Keith being like, I'm excited to see how quick he gets this thing rolling. And Keith alluded to it earlier that like what you've been able to accomplish in a couple seasons is it's impressive. But what was that like? Like when you first took that job, like where did your head go first? And like, I don't know, walk us through kind of some of the process there, because I think it's a unique thing to dive into.
Yeah, and I think the advantage that we have is that it's not necessarily it's more of a rebirth of a program. So we had a team from 1863 to 1995. So we have alumni, and I can assure you, without the alumni and without their support, that shortened curve would not have occurred. There's no shot. And I'll tell anybody who listens, like, man, I can't imagine doing this without the alumni. So first and foremost, they get a lot of that credit because they've been able to help us financially get the things that we need, move on, and just in Hobart and just in general, the administration of our support and, having the field, having the clubhouse, having, an old minor league ballpark, just a lot of the facilities were there, and so that part of it's really helped, shorten that curve for us. But right out of the gates, it was, I got the job in October, and I was like, man, we need some seniors. And it was a lot of phone calls. I mean, it really was. And again, I was fortunate that I had spent the time at UMass Lowell, and Hobart has a huge New England connection. It's about almost 30% of our student body's from New England. And so it was right out of the gates. It was phone calls. And then it was even people reaching out to me like, hey, I got the perfect kid. We're so excited that Hobart's back. We've sent lacrosse kids there. We've sent football kids there. We've sent so many kids to Hobart, but we've never been able to send baseball players there, but, without it. So that early on, it was just a lot of phone calls, and I think and again, just being fortunate of being an upstate New York guy and even having signed some kids from Rochester, from Syracuse, from Albany, at Lowell, or, down at Polk or Florida Southern, wherever it may be. And just having those connections of just the whole entire Northeast, really was huge. But yeah, it was a lot of phone calls early on and a lot of visits. Yeah, I mean, it was a lot early on, but I mean, I only know one way, and that's work. So I just put my head down and I went after it and did what I could in a short amount of time. And I would say the most challenging thing was just, I couldn't see kids play. And so I really had to trust people. It was October, it was November, it was December. I mean, I can remember having kids on visits. It's about 10 degrees out. It's snowing, the wind's blowing, whistling across the lake. And it's January. Here I am trying to convince this kid to come to school here. And it's not normally this bad and everything else. But I mean, yeah, I just went about the only way I know, man. And that's by working.
Love it. Love it. I'm fired up to see what you guys got cooking for next year. I know you're going to grind after it this summer to find some more dudes to get in there and help you win games.
Thank you.
I lost my train of thought. I had another question for you, and I got distracted by your
get it together over there.
I know. I lost track of what I was going to say. I had a good question for you, but I'll take a step back. What are some of the plans in the future here? Like, how do you continue to take this to the next level? Like, obviously it's going to be hard work, but I'm guessing that you've got a little bit of a plan here. Like, what are some of the things that you're looking to do to kind of take the program that next jump, getting into the conference tournament, trying to win that conference championship? Like, what are some of the things that you're trying to build inside that program there from a culture perspective?
Yeah, I mean, and that was, I mean, going back to kind of what were some of my priorities with the program. I mean, from the get go, it was culture. That was the most important thing in that first fall. Was like, this is what we're establishing, a blue collar culture of like, if we're going to get it, we're going to work for it. It's time and reps, man. That's the only way you're going to get anything in life. And so, I laugh because everyone's like, oh, like you guys should be pretty good next year. Yeah. And my response is always like, yeah, assuming everybody gets better. Right. Like you can't make that assumption. I mean, especially at the Division III level, where, I mean, I guess that's probably a bad assumption, but it's, a lot of kids, it's like, hey, when they're doing baseball, they're doing baseball. And sometimes it's not always their top priority, especially in the summer. They got internships, they're studying abroad, they're doing a lot of different things. They got to make money. So they're landscaping, they're doing whatever it takes. So maybe they don't get any better. Maybe they're already tapped out. Maybe that guy who is 82, 84, maybe he's going to be tapped out 82, 84. You can't assume he's going to be 85, 86 next year, or, just because, a kid hit 340 this year doesn't mean he's going to hit 340 next year. I mean, he can get hurt. There's just so many factors that go into it. And so that's the plan, is just continue to push them and challenge them and let them know that like, hey, we need you to be better. Like if we're taking this to the next level, if we're going to win it, if we're going to get back in that crossover. I mean, listen, we did some really good things this year, but I mean, at the end of the day, we were a walk-off triple play away from not being in that crossover. I mean, against St. Lawrence, with that play doesn't happen, we're not in the crossover, and so there was some things that also went our way. And, and the players understand that. They know they got a lot of work to do and they love it. They accept that challenge. And so I feel confident they're going to come back ready to go. And again, I think that's the culture that we've established. So, when it comes to taking it to the next level, I mean, I realize that we got to be bigger. We got to be bigger, faster, and stronger. When you play against Ithaca and, we tackled Oswego in a midweek game, and I mean, they were grown men, and we were not, we're not quite there, and it was good. And that's part of why I wanted to play Oswego. And that's why it's always great to play Ithaca and Rochester. In our IT, we even got a taste of it with RPI. I mean, those dudes in the middle of that lineup, I mean, they were older guys, and you could just see the difference. I mean, you can, and it's good for our guys to see that, and they know it, and they want it, and they're hungry, And so I think that's the next step, is that they just continue to push, and so we can continue to take this program to the next level. And that's it. I mean, I have the expectations, we have our standards, and we keep pushing that process, and we keep bumping it up, and the results are the results. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. But if we keep going about our business the right way, then I just believe that good things are going to happen for us.
Yeah, they will. And I think you and I talked about this early in the year when we were both at McDaniel. But the physicality in college baseball specifically, but also, at the Division III level has become a lot more prevalent in the last probably 5 to 7 years than it was before. Like, yeah, when we were all at Marist, we lifted and you did some stuff, but like, it wasn't what it is now. And I think that, like, to your point, like, you can go and watch those, like, because RPI hosted the tournament, like, a couple of the people who were working the game management stuff texted me, they're like, yo, there's some really physical teams in the Liberty League. And I was like, yeah, no, there are. There's a lot of physicality in college baseball now. And I think getting in the weight room in general is going to make you is going to help you get better. And, you're going to be able to do some more things. Your injury prevention goes up, all the good things. But the more physical you can be, the more you can handle what it is that you're about to undertake in this season. Like we talk about it with our guys, like getting in the weight room early, you can cut down that learning curve when you become a freshman of be like, you've already kind of gone through this. Yeah, it's going to be a little bit more difficult, but hey man, like you're physical and you want to get after in the weight room. Like it's one of the easiest ways, one, to kind of get burned early, but two, like earn the respect of a lot of the older guys. If it's a team that's good and is physical, like they're going to be in the weight room a lot. And if you get in there and mix it up with them, they're like, yo, this kid, all right, like this kid gets after in the weight room. Like I used to get fired up and my older guys would be like, yo, like 3/4 to 80% of the freshman class is like all in on the lifts. Like it's awesome in the weight room with these kids. It's like, okay, like now let's get the other 20% on board as we go. But like the physicality is so much different than what it was, 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago. Where like you're rolling out grown men at the Division III level, and I've said this before, and you're like, I played at like 215, 220. Like, I'm not even the average. Like, I'm below average on like LSU and Florida's in the national championship last year. Like, I'm not small. Like, I'm 6'1", 215 I played at. Like, I'm below average, which that's wild to think about. That, like, you know what I mean? Like, it's wild to think about, and like, I used to always joke with my guys, like, when in the fall, when you're practicing and stuff and you're watching the Alabamas of the world play, and it's like, I always joke with my guys, I'm like, isn't it wild that they're the same age as you guys? Like, those dudes are that big and physical. Like, they're literally the exact same age as you guys. But like, it's the physicality is a huge component to college baseball now. And if you don't love the weight room, like, you either need to fake it till you make it, or get in there and do it, because you're going to be asked to do a lot of physical stuff in the weight room when you get to college.
No question. There's no question about it. And even with that too, I think that was one of the big eye-opening things for me, just at Lowell, like going and playing. My first 3 weekends coaching at Lowell was Arizona, Georgia, and UNC. Those are my first 3 weekends. That was my introduction to coaching at the Division I level. And let me tell you, that was quite the great month. Let me tell. But I was kind of, my thing is, it was like, yeah, they're more skilled, they're better, right? They run a little bit fast, but I'm like, the difference is their shortstop 6'2", ours is 5'11". Like, that guy can drive the ball a yard. Our guy's not. He's hitting a double in the gap, like, and that was such a difference. And I can remember always sending that message to our guys. At Polk and Florida Southern, guys, obviously, they have. We got draft guys, we got, Power 5 guys, all that type of stuff. And I'm just like, listen, you guys just have to know how big those dudes in the big leagues are. Like, the TV doesn't do them justice. And it was pretty one of the cool things that we did at Florida Southern. We played the Tigers every year in a spring training game. And I can remember seeing Cabrera, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this dude is a doorway. And I had the pleasure of coaching with Jared Saltamaka, in Bourne, and he's just like one of the biggest human beings like that I've seen, and you're like, well, okay, this explains why they can do the things that they do, why they hit the baseball like they do. Like, it's different, it's different. And so, yeah, so back to the weight room, like, that's just the importance of it. Like, bigger, faster, stronger. Like, it's going to help you. I can assure you, it's not going to make you a worse player if you get in there. And cool thing about the weight room is anybody can do it. Mm-hmm. It's not biased. It's not anything. And the weight room doesn't lie. You can say you did this, you can say you didn't do that, but at the end of the day, 315 is 315, and you can or you can't, and there's no faking it.
Yeah, we had Tommy Canley used to throw at RPI all the time.
Tommy Canley.
I've known Tommy. He coached against you at Lynn, or you coached against him at Lynn. We were in that regional. Remember, we talked about that. Remember that regional? Oh my God.
That was one of the most impressive things. I'm pretty sure he threw, I think it was 5 games they won. And first of all, they only got in that regional. They beat us in extras. They had to take 2 out of 3 from us the last weekend, and they took 2 out of 3 from us, and they won one of the games in extra innings. And, we had a call not go our way that would have ended the game. They got the call, and then they won in extra innings, and that allowed them to get into that regional. And then they freaking win the regional, and they're national champs. But regional, Tommy Canley, I'm telling you, I think it was 4 or 5 games. I'm pretty sure he threw 3 innings every game. Out there, long hair, hat falling off, just picking his leg up and letting that thing rip. And it was some of the most impressive stuff I've ever seen, because it was every single game. It wasn't like, 1 inning. No, it was legitimately 3 innings of straight fuel right at you. And it was pretty fun to watch. Kind of
nitrous. And he was you guys had a bunch of draft guys. Daniel, he played for me at
Tillman.
Daniel Tillman, he threw nitro. Hayden Simpson was in that regional. He was a top 10 pick. He was all of 95 to 97. And this is 2009. Like, there wasn't a lot of dudes that were letting it rip 95, 97. Like, it was firm.
He was the best college pitcher at that time when I was coaching that I had seen in person. I mean, that breaking ball was unreal. And I remember going to Tyrell, was like, this is the best dude I've ever seen pitch in college. Of course, his response was
Justin Verlander.
Sorry, Jim. I didn't coach him. I didn't see it pitch live either. But Hayes, I mean, he was nasty. I mean,
he was so good.
I mean, I think that was one of the cool things about the Sunshine State and Division II baseball down there, was just the talent. It's unbelievable, the talent in Florida. And the Division II level, and that conference just in general is unreal.
I think the one thing, I'll finish the Tommy Canley thing. Like, he would come in and throw, like, his legs are so big. Like, it literally looks like he could throw the McCann Center on his back and squat it. Like, he would leave and my guys would be like, yo, his legs, like, how do they fit in those shorts? I'm like, man, he lifts a lot. Like, I don't know what to tell you guys. But, you know, the Division II thing, like, you know, when I went and coached at West Alabama, like, I played Division I baseball in New York. Like, I'm thinking I'm, you know, big Division I guy coming down here, like Division II baseball. How good can this be? And I was like we were sixth in the country. I mean, we were ranked the entire year. We were as high as sixth. And I was like, I mean, we played Tampa, we played Southern Arc. Like, we got into that regional. You're playing Delta State. You're playing Valdosta State. Like, I was like, my goodness, there's some really, like, this is legit baseball. And it opened my eyes, and I'm glad that I did it when I was that young, because I was so naive about it, of just thinking like Division I is the be all end all, no matter what level of Division I it is. And then you go down, and it's like, man, Florida Southern, Lynn, West Alabama, Delta State, Tampa, like, you throw these teams in the MAC, like, they're in the conference tournament and likely winning. Like, you know what I mean? So it's like, it opens your eyes, and I'm glad that I did it, because it was like, all right, man, like, there's a lot of really good baseball being played all over this country. And it wasn't, I wasn't so naive when I ended up as the assistant at RPI to be like, okay, it's Division III baseball. Like, how good can it be? And then, you know, we ended up in 15. We ended up in the regional final with Cortland. The year they ended up winning the World Series. I mean, they pulled away late, but I mean, it was really good baseball. I mean, they were rolling out the Lamondo kid, who was a coastal transfer, who was 93 to 95. Like, I mean, they were legit, man. Like, they were, and so were we. Like, we had 3 All-Americans. We were a really good baseball team. But all of a sudden, you're like, hey, man, like, it doesn't necessarily matter where, like, if you're playing college baseball and you're playing at a high level and you're able to compete, like, you go look at the high end, go watch some of the regionals that are going on this week in a Division III baseball. Like, you're going to see some high end baseball being played where, like, you might walk away and be like, I can't believe this is Division III baseball. Like, it's good.
There's no question. Yeah, I think it doesn't matter what level you watch. I think the only thing that changes is just the depth, right? Their backup's not the same backup, right? The 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th guy in the bullpen's that's not going to be the same, but the front end dudes in the middle of the lineup guys, like, it's pretty good baseball, man. It doesn't matter what the level is. If you're good, you're good. I mean, it's as simple as that. But yeah, I'm with you on that, with especially the Division II in Florida. I mean, I was glad at the same thing. I got to see that, you know, my first 2 years of college coaching. Like, that's what I got a taste of. And it was awesome. It was great. And I was even cooler to go from that to then going to Polk and really understanding, like, well, now I can get why kids end up here, you know, and why are they a Division II kid? And it's not talent. It has nothing to do with that. It's money, right? It's the financial packages that they could do. And it's grades, it's transferring of credits and all that type of stuff. And it was really great to have that side of it too. That, I mean, I can think of some of the best, some of our best players that we had at Polk went to Tampa, went to Florida Southern. You know, they went to Lynn, they went to Rollins, like, some of our best players. Like, that's where they were going. And it was because, well, they were going for free.
No, we did really well in Florida when I was at RPI, because, you know, there's not, like, if you want a high-end academic, if you want a STEM education, like, and you want to play baseball, like, you have to leave the state, realistically, you know. And we did really well. We had some really good players out of there. And it's interesting when you coach in the high academic world, which, you know, you're now in, you do have to recruit nationally, because there's only so many kids that you can pull from that can also afford it and all that, because there are no athletic scholarships at the Division III level. So, like, you know, there's a lot more that goes into, you know, being able to fill out a roster. And, you know, I think, you know, to bring it full circle from the front, like, being able to rely on all your contacts and coaching in Florida and in the Cape and in New England, and being from you, like, there's so many people that you can call and be like, okay, what do you got? Who do you know? Who do I have to be on? And it can shrink your world to where it's a lot more manageable versus, like, okay, we're going to start on the West Coast and just work East and see what happens. And generally speaking, you're not going to end up in the greatest of spots.
Yeah, I mean, and to your point, I was flipping through the portal yesterday, and I saw a kid and looked him up, and I saw he was from Vancouver, and I'm like, all right, and we had a pretty good connection in at Polk with Western Canada, 4 different kids, and so I reached out to that guy. I was like, hey, do you know this kid? Because I mean, as big as Canada is, I mean, they're still very sectioned, right? Western Canada, like they usually know about anybody who's anybody they know, and so boom, there I was reaching out to one of my former players in Florida who was from Western Canada about a Western Canadian kid.
I think that talking because you've coached at pretty much every significant level. Division 1, 2, 3, junior college, and then you get to the upper echelon of Division 1 with the Cape League, right?
Yep.
I think one of the biggest efforts that we have in what we do now is educating people on how competitive it is at any level. I mean, and this gets back to what you guys were chopping it up about, but I think there's a huge misconception around what it takes to play at certain levels. And there's an uninformed notion that if you want to play college baseball, you can do it at the Division III level. And I don't think that people realize that, like, the first prerequisite is, like, you need to be a good high school player first. And the barrier to entry is a lot higher, and it's higher now than it's ever been for various reasons. The draft is shortened. You got the transfer portal. I feel like the prevalence of coaches leveraging the junior college circuit is even more than it was 10 or 15 years ago. And it's so darn competitive, and people, they scoff at if it's not Division I because they don't really realize the tiers within the tiers. And it's a hard thing to get at unless you've experienced it. And we talk about it all the time, but there's good baseball players all over the country. And, like, if you want to play college baseball, you need to be good in high school first, and you need to find a place that's a fit for you as a player and as a family, from an education perspective, from a financial perspective. And it might not have the number one next to the division next to it. And that doesn't mean that you're not good. And it doesn't mean that you're not a good baseball player. And, you guys are talking about big leaguers at the Division II World Series. Like, there's going to be future big leaguers who are playing in the Division III World Series this year. And I think it's one of the biggest mistakes that a lot of families make early on in the process is they assume they know more about the landscape than they do, and they underestimate what it takes to play at any level of college baseball. And I think what you guys just hit on with your experiences at different levels, like, it showcases that. Like, it's hard to play college baseball. It really is. Like, it's a difficult thing to do, and there's a lot of good baseball all over the country.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you have to be good. And I laugh because I've coached four big leaguers, and none of them are Division I. I mean, 3 of them are junior college, and one was a Division II guy. And I mean, to look at it that way,
Yeah.
Yeah, you got to be good. You got to be good to play college baseball, and you got to be committed to it. It's a lot of time, it's a lot of work, and you got to want to do it.
No doubt. I think that segues into the last question we like to let's ask guys as we get into the podcast is, what's some advice that you would give to parents and players as they go through this process? I mean, you've done it at all these different levels. You're the head coach at a fantastic university. What are some tips you might want to hand out to some families that might be listening?
Yeah, I think we kind of hit on a little bit. I was thinking about this question, and I will tell people, go watch college baseball. Like, go watch it. There's, especially this time of year, go out and try to get to a regional, try to go to a Division III regional, try to go to a Division II regional. If you can, go to a Division I regional, go off to the World Series. Like, go watch college baseball. Almost anywhere you are, there's probably college baseball happening easily within an hour of you at probably all levels, especially in the Northeast. With as many Division I's, Division II's, Division III's are out there. Even in the South, you got your NAIAs. I mean, one of my great friends, Colin Martin's head coach at Weber International. I can tell you right now, that program, they can go compete with some of the best teams, and so the level is irrelevant, and so go out and watch it. And so you can see what it's like, and you can see that how much those kids love to play the game and how much they put into it and how much they care. And so I think my advice would just be go out and watch. And then the other thing is don't don't get caught up in the label of stuff. And I mean, it's great that you want to say your kid's a Division I player and stuff, but like, that's not what playing college baseball is about. Like, it's just not. It's about the experience. It's about the opportunity, the brotherhood that you build with those guys, and the experience of being a student athlete, and what that's going to teach you for the rest of your life. How that's going to set you up. I think anybody who's been a college athlete can just speak on ends of what that really did for them in terms of anything, of how to be a team player and how to get along and work with maybe people you don't necessarily have a great relationship with, but you'll still do whatever it takes for them to help us win. How to manage your time. You talked about facing adversity, how to handle that, how to go through tough times in your life and not curl up in the corner. Like, it's okay to curl up in the corner for a hot second, for a few minutes, but at some point, right, you got to put your pants on, you got to cowboy up, and you got to find a way. And that's going to be life. That's going to be at work. Like, when you talk about a coach getting on you, being criticized, like, guess what? There's a good chance your boss is going to do that to you. You're going to get evaled at the end of the year. You're going to have it in writing of like, hey, they want you to start doing these things. You're going to have people, that you don't necessarily trust, but yet you still have to work with that person, right? You still have to do things with them, and vice versa. Like, there's just so many things that happen in being a student athlete that happens on a team, especially a baseball team of 35, 40 guys. That just prepares you so much for life that you don't even realize it's even occurring at that time until you grow up and you have to get a real job and you pay taxes and you own a house and you get married and you have kids and you do just so many of these things, and you realize like really how much that actually prepares you for, and that could be anything. Like, it can be anything. And, whether that's the pressure of an interview, a pressure of a presentation. Again, if you're prepared and you know it, then you expect those things to happen. If you're unprepared, then you're hoping that it's going to happen. Just very simple things like that they're going to teach you that when you toe the rubber, you step into that box. And if you know you've put the work in, then you expect good things to happen. And when you don't, you're going to be pissed. You're going to be angry about it. But yet you're going to evaluate yourself. You're going to figure out a way to how to get it done right the next time. And that's going to happen in life all the time.
I think that's wonderful advice for the people who are listening. Can't thank you enough for spending some time. I know you're a busy man. Really appreciate it. And I know I'm excited. Hopefully we'll cross paths again this summer, and we can reminisce over the old Red Fox times and catch up on world news and whatever we may talk about. But can't thank you enough, Brad. Really appreciate it, man.
Andy, Keith, man, thank you. And I love what you guys are doing. I love what you guys are building. Love talking to you guys. I could keep going all night. And I'm glad we could make this work. This was great. It was good catching up. Keith, it was great seeing you, McDaniel, and Andy. I know I'll see you guys this summer. So, but again, just appreciate giving me that opportunity, the platform to kind of talk about Hobart and what we're trying to do, and just some of my experiences, and again, what you're doing for high school kids in the recruiting process. I can tell you, anybody who's working with these two, you guys are in great hands. So, just thank you guys for everything you're doing.
Appreciate that, man. Well, thank you everybody for listening. Tune in next week. We'll talk to you then. Thank you for listening this week. If you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and smash that like button for us. Check us out on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, as well as Spotify. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at EMD Baseball. If you want to find out what me and Keith do to help families and players navigate the recruiting process, go ahead and check us out on emdbaseball.com. Take a few minutes to check out our new online academy. I promise you'll get some good information out of that. Thanks again for listening. Check in with you next week.